Hello and welcome back to IT Security Labs. And I'm very excited today that you're joining me on this weekly live stream. And if you're brand new, please remember to like and subscribe. On this channel, we focus more on hands-on information security labs learning. A lot of people would like to give you a lot of advice on what you should do, which certifications you can take. On this channel, we focus more on which skills you can actually get doing hands-on, no BS, and no one can ever take away what we're going to be learning today. So if you're new here, welcome and welcome to the show. This is going to be very exciting. I wanted to introduce you to the detection lab because it's very critical to what we'll be doing today. If you want to set up a lab environment with Splunk, like the way I'm going to show you today, look at this GitHub repository here from Chris Long. This is the base of all the labs that I'm using for today. And I'm using detection lab in ESXi. Very simple to set up. Go ahead and set it up if you can. Then, of course, this is what it looks like when you set it up in ESXi. We are attacking a Windows Active Directory environment, so the DC, which is the domain controller, is our main attack target. We want to break into a Windows domain controller and be able to do some Active Directory attacks. And this is going to be our main attack. If you want to set it up, use this detection lab. In addition to that, I'm also configuring it so that it's custom. So if you want the custom setup for the DC machine, I have a link in the description. It only works in VMware. I have not tested it in VirtualBox, but there are ways you can do it. Other than that, with the same lab, we are going to have Splunk, which is very exciting to be using. So I'm going to show you how we can do host-based detection. So you attack a Windows Active Directory, you break into the machine, you do your Active Directory attacks. Well, what do the good guys see? What do the defenders see? A lot of you are going to learn that even though hacking is considered sexy and all that, really, in the real world, people want you to know both attacking and defending. You are pretty much useless to me if all you do is attack and you have no idea how to mitigate those attacks that you just did. So make sure that you stick around for the analysis as well as we go through all the events that happened, both between in Splunk, and we might look into Security Onion. I'm not sure if my mirroring is working right now. But without wasting any time, if the audio is good, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, let's get started here. First, deploy the machine. It's called DC. This is a Windows Active Directory domain controller machine. And as you can see it here, it's on 192.168.38.119. As an attacker, you will get this IP address either from your white box pen test, or they don't tell you at all. You have to scan the network and identify that this is the IP address of the Active Directory environment. Right now, I'm just going to say somehow you have your Active Directory environment, it's set up, and somehow you scanned the network and you found this IP address. How you get to this IP address could vary. All right, thank you. So right now it's 192.168.38.119. So of course we're going to jump into our Kali Linux here. Let me just start over. So this is Kali. Don't be misled by the fact that it looks like it's not. In here I have a directory for, I think it says :2, like that. Wait a second. I thought I created a directory here. I guess I didn't. All right, let's do it. You always want to work from a clean directory so you know you can organize your tools and you're not all over the place. So I'll say this is going to be VulnDC 2. All right, so from this working directory here, we're going to say nmap. Nmap is our network mapper minus SV. Give us service versions. I always want to know service versions right off the bat. Minus SC 192.168.38. I already forgot it. 119. All right, this will not scan your whole 65,500 ports. Let's be very clear here. This is a lazy man's way of scanning a network. If you want initially to see what's going on the network, this is what you do. This will not scan all the 65,000 ports. If you want that, you need to do the -p, lowercase p. You will scan all TCP ports. You also need to use -su to do UDP ports. So if you are someone who's going for these CTF exams, like what the practical pen tests, whatever certification in the OSCP or EJP, make sure to scan UDP, TCP, and all ports, was those types of exams do try to test you on that. But as you can see here, this is very overwhelming. Someone who is not experienced in CTF or even just pen testing in general, they look at this, their brain pretty much like, they lose their mind like, oh my God, I'm screwed. I see DNS here, I see port 80, or I see 88. Your brain will pretty much freeze here. But lucky for you and I, we have a lot of practice with these things. Most of this is just a bunch of noise. We can filter through this quickly and get to some answers very, very efficiently here. So that's what we're going to be doing right now. Well, first, let's see. That's interesting. So we have port 53. Here's where your attack methodology matters, right? You need to really come up with a strategy that works and that you stick to. There are things that I'm not going to do today that you should do, and I'm going to mention them here. You see port 53, that's DNS. And as you can see here, DNS is what you use for domain name service. And usually when you see a port 53 running on a Windows machine, that's a good sign that it's a domain controller. And this is how you can tell. Usually people in a Windows environment don't have port 53 running on a bunch of machines that are not domain controllers. So this is a good telltale sign. Then of course we have a good port 80, which is kind of fun. You always have to go and check. It even here's a robots.txt, which we should check. And right here, this is like the dead giveaway. Port 8080, which is Kerberos. Now we know we are running really a Windows Active Directory. We see Kerberos and LDEP running on the same machine. Chances are you have a 90% chance this is a Windows Active Directory or just an Active Directory machine, because people do run Active Directory in Linux, by the way. There's alternative ways you can do it. So what do we do with this? Because this is kind of overwhelming. It actually tells us it's a Windows Server 2016. It's an evaluation. Okay. So right away, since this is DNS, we'll move on to port 80 to begin with, because it's the easiest thing to start with. So open your browser and let's check out port 80. It says what are ports to be noticed. Confirm it's an 80. Yeah, port 53, port 88, and 389. It's likely an Active Directory machine. You see those ports, you're looking at an Active Directory machine. All right, but this one, some administrator, I used to be a Windows administrator, so I know this is actually something that can actually happen. I've made some of these mistakes before. Some administrator decided, oh, hey, why don't we just run a web server on this thing? We already have the resources. Let's run a web server and see how it goes. So we are here to check out their web server and see what the web server is going to say. Oh, great. So it looks like somebody's really lazy. They started installing a web server, and this is just some default version of it. That's kind of not cool. You just have a default web server. It says write CMS. I'll tell you, if you see something, whatever.cms, these CMS things are plagued with vulnerabilities. Like, I kid you not. If you see a CMS in an exam, you are in business. CMSs are just, I don't know what's up with these things. Every time, if you're on VulnHub, hack the box, try hack me, anything that ends with CMS, you know you're really in business. So this administrator here installed a CMS server. How fun. But somehow it looks like it's just the default. Either two things. Either they put something behind this, maybe to a hidden directory, or they just installed it and left. So this is what happens. When you are being asked to attack Active Directory, you need a way into that Active Directory. You don't just start attacking Active Directory and doing Kerberoasting and all the fun stuff. You need to break in, and that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to break into Active Directory, and we see that they misconfigured CMS. There is another way you can look at this. Thanks, Reggie. Reggie says remote code execution is a way. Yeah, let's look at that very quickly. So if you have Active Directory, look at the services that are running. Look at SMB. Look at network shares. I'll configure network shares. I think last week I showed you a network share that was vulnerable. Look at websites that may be running, not just on the Active Directory domain machine, but other servers that are connected to the Active Directory. So for the OSCP, there are 3 machines that you are given for the exam. You have 2 clients and 1 domain controller. You're going to show up there to the exam. You're going to look at the clients. My understanding or my guess is going to be they're going to give you some random Windows 10 client and some Windows 2016 client, both connected to a domain controller. What services are they running? Are they running a website like this? And is that website silly enough that it will let you in? Then that's your way in. Are they doing file shares? And are those file shares running with SMB1 enables and some random hashes or users listed somewhere? That's your way in. In this case, we actually have a website running on our domain controller. So Reggie said that, let's go here. Remote code execution. How do we find that? Well, if you look all the way at the bottom here, it says write CMS version 3. We can look this one up on Google. I'm going to exploit DB. So I just Googled exploit DB here. All right. Oh, look at this thing here. Said write CMS, whatever that thing was. Look at this, from 2022. So this is from this year. On the 5th, we had a few vulnerabilities on version 3.1 of write CMS. And let's look at authenticated remote code execution. When you're looking at these here, someone may probably be wondering, well, why did you go to exploit DB? I went to exploit DB because OffSec maintains this, and chances are for their exam they use this. And also, this is where most people like to post their vulnerabilities. So here's a remote code execution. We also have arbitrary file and whatever these things are. Remote code execution is the most appealing for us. So let's open that. And it does tell us it was tested on Windows 10 and Ubuntu on XAMPP. Okay, this is not Windows 10, but it's Windows Server 2016, according to what we saw. So we might be still safe here. Why do you need to check here? If it was not tested in your version, you might want to look at other exploits that are tested on your system, because you might waste a lot of time here. And then, of course, remote code execution is very fun. It says here you can actually execute arbitrary code if you authenticate. Or we are not authenticated, so let's look up whatever that write CMS is here. We are not authenticated. This exploit requires us to be authenticated. One way is for you to figure out what something is to look up its source code. In this case, I just did a simple Google search. It's actually on GitHub. And if you read through this, it will tell you like, hey, by the way, here's how we install this thing. And by the way, the default user data is admin. So we now have some default credentials that we can try. You're given some application, it's vulnerable. You Google the hell out of that application, find out if it has any default credentials. If it does, you sign in with those. If it doesn't, you try whatever you can or you brute force. All right, so we can authenticate here. We will try using the default credentials. And here's our proof of concept. We have a few ways that we can actually do. So Log in as an admin, go to Files Manager, choose a directory to upload. Then it looks like for us here to bypass HT access, we need to change PHP and put a capital H. So a lot of people say, hey, do not allow any PHP files. Indeed, they put PHP all lowercase. They don't account that someone can put PH with capital, and browsers don't care. They'll still process this file. So we're going to use this here. All right, so how do we know where the admin page is? So far, what we've seen is some generic page here. Someone is probably thinking, well, what does this have anything to do with Active Directory? Well, you don't just get handed Active Directory credentials. You have to break in somehow. So let's fire up GoBuster, DareBuster, whatever you prefer. I'm going to fire up a lazy man's directory busting. Derb. If you're lazy, this is what you do. You fire up derb. Derb is not as thorough as GoBuster or DareBuster, but it's a very quick way for you to just check, hey, what other directories do you have? Do I have any easy targets on you? Well, so far, we're being told we need to authenticate, but we have no idea what they're talking about, right? So looking here, you see right away we have admin.php. As an attacker, I'm happy now. I have an admin page. That's where I like to be. So let's go to say /admin.php. Aha, now we're talking. So now I can try to sign in here. Going back to our GitHub, it said somewhere here. I want to show you again because it's kind of easy to miss this thing. To administrate the page, go to whatever this here. The default admin user data is admin. You're an attacker. You should think about these things. What are the default credentials? Because a lot of people are lazy. They will not change them. Just like when I was creating this machine, I left admin. If you did not Google that, you'll be like sitting here scratching your head, getting bowled, wondering, oh, how do I sign in? You are an attacker. You should look up default credentials. And all the people out there do the same thing. So if you didn't, even if you are not being asked, you can try administrator, password, admin. You should try default credentials. It would be a shame for you to call yourself a hacker and you are presented with a login page and you don't even bother to try the obvious. That's not a hacker mindset, to be honest. You need to try the obvious. All right, so now that we broke in, we can go back to what ExploitDB was telling us. It said, okay, right now it's just a matter of you being good at following instructions. No skill required here. Read, do it. Read, do it. So you logged in as admin, which we did. Go to Files Manager. So admin, we're like, oh, where's Files Manager? All the way at the bottom here. Click on admin. You might have to click around a little bit. It's kind of still loading, it looks like. Or maybe I can click on home. Yeah, click on home, it's not admin. And here's Files Manager. I'm just following instructions here. Choose a directory to upload a PHP file, either media or files directory. At the end here, they're actually going to media, so I'm just going to use media. So directory is by default media. We can upload a file. Oh, now comes the idea. What the hell are they talking about? Well, it's a Windows system. So you cannot just go to Pentest Monkey and be like, hey, let's just put the default PHP. That doesn't work here. So we need to do some Googling. I'm going to say Windows. I'm going to just Google on a different page here. Windows PHP reverse shell and Git. I'm not showing you this because I don't have an incognito page today. But here is our Google search. Windows PHP reverse shell GitHub. Oh, guess what? Someone does have a freaking PHP reverse shell that you can use for Windows. Unbelievable. So you don't have to even like, I mean, there are 10 ways you can do this. This is like, again, the lazy man's way of doing it. I encourage you to know all of them. You can have a web-based shell, which I think we can try. But right now, Windows PHP reverse shell, because we can upload a PHP file. And how do we know that? We are being asked to upload a PHP file here. It says it needs to be webshell.php. I'm not uploading a web shell. I'm just uploading a real PHP file, because this is the way I want to do it today. But we can also Google Windows web shell, which I think is kind of fun. But for now, for the sake of time, since this is just a way to get in, so we can do this. So let's clone this repository here and make some changes. This is where working in a directory is going to help you. So let's cancel that. Where's my directory? Problem with naming your machines the same is autocomplete will not always work for you. Okay, let's clone the whole repository. Why can't I just copy it? Copy the script? Is because I don't want to make any silly mistakes and end up with like a cloned thing that didn't really. I mean, you copy and you miss something, or you don't format it correctly. Being able to avoid silly mistake is going to be just the way to go. And I don't like silly mistake, and I make them a lot. Well, first of all, here's my reverse shell, and it's named in a way that I don't like. So I'm going to move that, copy that file, and I would like it out of this directory a little bit, and I'll name it winshell.p. According to our exploit, it needs to have a capital H in the PHP. Here, follow instructions, right? It says PH capital P. So I'm going to do that. So it's winshell.php. Where is that? It's now copied here. All right. I'm in as root, but I'm signed in as a not normal user. So to make my life easier, to my users downloads folder. All right. You know what? I copied it before I modified it. So let's just go there. All right, here's our file. Let's edit it. If you have used Pentest Monkey Reverse Shell, this is the same deal. It's as easy as that. It's one of the ways that I've been shown on this channel. Like I said, there are 20 ways you can do this. This is one of them. What's happening here? All right, there we go. So if you have used PHP Reverse Shell before, it's mindless. You literally have to come in here and say, oh, I want to change this to be my IP address. So I would like this to be my 192.168.38. What? We don't know what our IP address is, so let's figure it out. And we are on 3831. All right. Port is 1234. It says to change it. I guess we'll change it. Or do we change it? Lazy me says leave it to 1234. But of course, if you're doing this for a customer environment, you'll be detected in no time. So using 1234 as a port for you is not ideal. Another thing for this port that I would like to mention is go back to your Nmap result. What I've noticed, especially for the OSCP, firewalls are always in place. You will not get a reverse shell with some random port. So pick a port that's already open. Catch your shell on 53, 21, 80, 88. Use a port that's already open on the victim for those exams or even when firewalls are in place. Otherwise, doing what I just did here, you will not get your shell and you'll be scratching your head wondering what happened. All right, so now that we have our reverse shell here, let's go back here and say, oh, we want to upload that. So let's go to our downloads. And here's our winshell.php. Open that. So what just happened here is there is a filter that says do not apply PHP files. It's in the HTTP access file, but we bypassed it by putting capital H here. Usually it's PHP or lowercase. However, browsers do not care. When you try to visit this in a browser, it will still get to this file. And that's how we are able to exploit this. That's the vulnerability. And sure enough, we didn't get any errors. It uploaded. Great. So what else do we do? We uploaded our shell. Next, it says, hey, by the way, the webshell.php is now available on your local hosts. Like that. Okay. So we just have to visit it in a browser, which is not a problem. But before we visit it, we have to start our listener. And it's netcat minus LV and P 1234. My firewall is not working, so 1234 is going to give us a shell. Then, of course, we go back here. We say /media /winshell.php. If we did this right, it will hang. Watch it spin here. This is good news. If yours does not spin like this and it just gives up right away, you might be in trouble. And if you want to know that your reverse shell is about to work, it will spin. And if we go back here, we are in a Windows system. Very simple attack. We just broke into a Windows server machine, as you can see here. Who am I? Really? All right. Anyway, it says we are NT authority system. When I had set this one up, I actually set up this to run as a service account. So this is a glitch in my system. But anyway, let's assume you're just a useless user, right? You can still do all your Active Directory attacks here. Clear screen. Oh, it doesn't clear either. But you can still do your Active Directory attacks here anyway. So this is, oh, I know what happened. I changed this to run. So when if you downloaded this machine and you do a who am I, you'll probably be in as a Vagrant user instead of NT system, because you shouldn't be. And usually you get in as a service account and you're like, well, from a service account, how do I escalate my privileges? So here, what we can do is we're in the Windows temp anyway. We can do it there. And we see, oh, we just have this. This is what our reverse shell created. We can now try to transfer some binaries here to do our Active Directory attacks. So in this case, I'm going to bring up Mimikatz to start to do some enumeration for Active Directory accounts and other things. Yes, thanks, BT. And from everything that I've done, the biggest takeaway is just because it's an Active Directory attack doesn't mean that you just show up and you start fighting Active Directory. You still have to break in somehow. And today we picked you a vulnerability from 2022. I haven't seen it exploited anyway, so this might be the first time you've seen it in this case. All right, so let's move Mimikatz to our victim machine. I have this in my notes saved as file transfer. Where's my OneNote? You need to know how to transfer files. It will be very silly of you to struggle transferring files. There's a few things that you can use, like setutil, wget, anything that you have at your disposal. I encourage you to have at least 3 or 5 ways of transferring files. That means mounting file shares, SMBs, wget, setutil, and even any other tools that you can find, because it's going to be very important that you have multiple ways to transfer files. So in this case, let's use setutil actually, if I can find my notes here. All right, so let's search for setutil. Here's our syntax. So we say setutil, give us a file from whatever the place to ctemp. So this will actually work for us. You might be like, oh, why do you have to look up syntax? There's a lot of tools out there. I don't have the brain capacity up here to memorize every single one of them. And to be honest, I don't try. Even the simplest syntax like setutil, I don't have that time to memorize it. So I just make sure that I document things that I have. So I still want things to go to C. This is going to go to C Windows such temp. Okay, so this is going to be our syntax here. But before we do that, let's find our Mimikatz. I think I can do that. I have Mimikatz here, .exe. All right. So I have in user share Windows resources 64-bit. This is a 64-bit system. After 2016, Windows 2016, it's safe to assume you are likely going to be dealing with a 64-bit system. So I'm going to copy that and let's go back here. Let's copy Mimikatz to this directory. And I just want it the way it is. All right, I have mimikatz.exe. I need to move it using setutil, so I'll use Python 3 -m http.server on 80. This is one of the easiest ways to move files. Of course, now it's exposing this whole directory. And I just need to make sure that my setutil command has mimikatz.exe set up. So let's stage it here. So we're going to say this is going to be Windows temp mimikatz.exe. And where are we going? Oh, come on. We're coming from 38.135. What was the IP for this thing? .31. And we're getting a file called mimikatz.exe. So what is setutil going to do? It's like a wget, but native to Windows. So if Windows Server 2016 has it, we should be able to download Mimikatz. If it doesn't have it, we need to move to PowerShell. So let's go back here. Remove all this. We cannot edit in here. That's why I like to stage it somewhere else. Let's paste it here. All right. So if you do it there, here's Mimikatz. So now, if I run my Mimikatz, I'm in as Mimikatz. All right, so someone is probably thinking, well, what's up with Mimikatz? Who is Mimikatz and why should we know Mimikatz? Because it could be a very interesting discussion, you know. I have an article here from Hacking Articles, very, very wonderful blog. And when you get it on an Active Directory machine, like a machine that is connected to a domain or the domain controller itself, there's a few attacks you need to look at on Active Directory, and I'll mention them before we end here. But today we are talking about Kerberoasting. This article here is going to explain to you how Kerberos work and how you can, attack Kerberos. So I encourage you to check it out, because I'm not explaining Kerberos today. I'm attacking Kerberos, but it's very, very important that you know how Kerberos work. But for our attack here, we are looking for Mimikatz. There's a lot of ways you can do it. You can do it like what we did last week, where you can attack remotely with in-packet packets, or you can just upload Mimikatz the way we did. So here's method 2. So you can download and execute Mimikatz on the system, and this will look for the SPN service. I mean, the SPN feature on the systems, and SPN can be set up the way I showed you last time, where you don't check for Kerberos authentication, but also you can look for service accounts and see if you can actually get their password hashes or encrypted hashes there. So first, let's list Kerberos list. Someone will be showing you this, they'll pretend like they have this all memorized. I think it's a lie that anyone can memorize everything like this. So when we do Kerberos list here, we're just going to check, what do we have? Well, we have a bunch of users. I have a lot of users that I've set up on this machine here, but we do have Kerberos running, as indicated by this KRBT server name in the server name. So we can see we have that one. Our domain controller is dc.domain windomain.local, which is interesting. All right, so we know we can try some Kerberosting on this system. And the idea here is you are in as a limited user. Or what else can you do? You can look for accounts with SPN. You can look for any other users there. For example, you can just run net users on the system. But in this case, we just want to go for Kerberosting, because that's kind of the easiest thing you should check. So this is part of your checklist. You can run and see if you can dump all the tickets. Remember from last week, if you can get a TGS ticket, that ticket contains the user's encrypted password hashes. So you can actually get users' encrypted password hashes and decrypt them with John and other things. So let's see if this command here will actually work. All right. So looking at these results here, I do see that our export kind of worked. All right. We'll go back to Kerberos in a little bit here. But as you can see here, on our domain controller, I'm looking at we have HTTP. Our HTTP user is actually the one that I had this lab set up. So if you're attacking this after this live stream, you'll probably see HTTP _ SVC shown there, because that's the one that I actually set up for this lab. That's the one I was hoping to drop into to make sure that it actually works. All right. So it should tell us that it was saved to a file. Let's see if I have a file here for every single one of these. Yeah, I do. So I have a file called whatever this is here, which is kind of interesting. So let's exit Kerberos ls dir, because that's going to be interesting. All right, so any users that have SPN set up for them, they're here. As you can see, we have LDEP. These are usually service accounts that you get to see here. Not every single one of them is actually set up. I have this HTTP here. That's really set up. So let's see, where does this actually start? This is the one that I want to actually go for, because that's the one that I set up. You can set up any other account, but let's look for HTTP because that's the service account. This will give you the service account hash, and there's ways you can manipulate these service account hashes. You can just do emulate a service account and sign into a service like MySQL, for example. You can go in there and start running SQL commands. There's a lot of interesting things that you can do. But I think HTTP, I did set that one up. So let's go back here. You can convert that hash to be in the John format. I think this is looking for John. Let me see. Yeah, this is the format for John. If you're going to use any other tools, you need to go for other tools. So we need to move that to whatever this name here. Then you can move it out of there. Okay. Then you can use John to crack the hash. Let me see. Did I actually... let's see if I can do a type. All right, this is the encrypted hash. It's a lot of gibberish, as you can see here. So it won't actually work for us. So you can grab this and crack it with John. But before you do that, let's go and see our Splunk, because we did a few things already that should have fired within Splunk. All right. In order for you to use Splunk here, there's a few things you should know. Detection lab being one of them. This is the lab that we set up, and this lab comes with Splunk as our SIEM solution. There's an option to run this same lab with Elastic. I think that the one with Splunk is better because you get to learn Splunk, you get forced to learn Splunk, which is a very, very popular SIEM. But personally, I like Elastic SIEM because it works well and it's easier to use. But Splunk is also something we should look at. And when you set up this lab here, you need to be familiar with not only how to get into the lab, which is this information here, but the most important is the indices that it gives you. And let's talk about these indices quickly. There's a PowerShell index that will show you PowerShell logging, which is very, very important, especially in today's world. PowerShell is like the way to do a lot of things. Even people are running malware in PowerShell. So make sure to enable PowerShell login. And in this lab, we have PowerShell transcription enabled. We also have Suricata. For me personally, I don't like Suricata from this lab. I have a security onion running Suricata. So for this lab, I don't even look at the Suricata index. But Sysmon, this is very, very important as well. So if someone installs software, like right now, I think we just installed, we just put Mimikatz. If you put any binaries, Sysmon should be catching it. We have a threat hunting one that I haven't looked at, but also we have win event log. Win event log, and so far, what I've seen, Sysmon are going to be the best for us to look at as a starting point. So let's look at, in this case, I was looking at win event log. Then I also looked for a host, and I called it dc.local. Then I said, let me remove this first, because this was after I knew what I was looking for. Let's just look for events from win event log that are coming from our host, because this lab is huge, right? Yeah, thanks, BT. And BT does have a step-by-step setup for this. You can set it up. I think this is in your VMware workstation. Yeah, you should use that. So from Sysmon, win event log, you can see any processes that have been running here. And there's a lot of noise that might come out. But say if you were a defender and you wanted to make sure that you're looking for things that are interesting, things like who am I are very kind of interesting. So here's one. Someone ran the command who am I. Who runs whoami.exe on a system unless if they don't know who they are? Remember when we ran the command whoami, it pulled the binary whoami.exe. So this is an indicator that someone was in here asking the system who they are. In this case, this was actually us. So if you've never used Splunk, or if you're curious, like, oh, how do defenders create their detection rules, you can have a rule here that says, hey, if somebody runs whoami.exe, I'd like to know. Because usually people who signed in a legitimate way never wonder who they are. It's like you can't ask yourself, like, oh, what is my name, unless if you're like an imposter. So right here we can see, oh, from the command line, someone ran whoami, and you can see the timestamp when it happened. You can see the source IP address. The host in this case was WinDomain. You can see the source IP address and the destination IP address, and a bunch of other interesting information here that you can use to validate that things actually are working. BT is asking if it caught Mimikatz. So let's go and look for Mimikatz. Did it actually catch Mimikatz? Because we did execute Mimikatz. Okay, so you can do things like and. Right now I'm just using an and in this case, process command line, I'm looking for command cmd.exe. Okay, who ran cmd.exe? On a system, usually if it's a single system, in this case, it's just one domain controller, you might not have a lot of things. But right now, as you can see here, I'm looking for the command line, and then I'll look for Mimikatz in a little bit. But I wanted to show you this line here. If you know a little bit about Windows command line, you know, oh, who runs command line with -C and this default. What is this thing here? This is actually what our reverse shell generated on the system. This was part of the meshed up gibberish that was in our reverse shell, like our PHP reverse shell. And it ran that exe. It looked to connect on 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember the port that I was too lazy to change in our reverse shell? Then it reached out to 192.168.38.31. So looking at this, you know, someone ran command line, ran some random script. You might have to go to VirusTotal or look up what this thing is, or even extract it from the victim and have your malware analysis team look at its behavior. But it reached out to 1, 2, 3, 4 on this. This might as well be a netcat reaching out to an external service. So right away, we know someone ran some random executable here. And it was actually ran a couple of times. So yeah, if you were a defender, you should make sure to add maybe something like this, something silly like this to your Splunk alerts. I don't have Splunk alerts set up today, but it would be nice to have this as part of your alerts. I'm just using the trial version without all the bells and whistles here. Let me see if I have Mimikatz somewhere. So Mimikatz.exe, it has to have shown up somewhere. All right. We haven't ran any PowerShell commands, but if you ran PowerShell commands, this is where they will look up. This is where they will show up. So if you set up the detection lab the way I did, and the way that BT showing her, here's PowerShell commands. They will show up here as PowerShell auditing. All right, let's find out about this Mimikatz thing, because we have to be able to tell if Mimikatz was ran. We ran an executable after all. So win event log is not showing us that. Let's see if Sysmon can. Do I have anything in my search here? I did this one earlier. All right, let's see if we can find Mimikatz. We have to be able to find Mimikatz. Maybe it's buried somewhere in here. because we just ran an executable as a user. Let's do it this way. So if you're not familiar, like, okay, how do I do this search here? Look at all the interesting fields that you get here. We have computer name, keywords, message. Yeah, BT is suggesting to search all the indices here to see if we can get to it. But if I look at the messages here, here's a bunch of TGT. Remember when we did our request? This is interesting. When we were looking for SPN accounts, we actually generated a bunch of this, the Kerberoasting authentication tickets here. We got a bunch of TGT requests, which is kind of interesting. All right. In a big environment, I don't encourage you to use this index star here. This might lock your system. And any administrator who is worth their salt, they will not allow their users to search all their indices for wildcards and use another wildcard after that. Because imagine if someone is looking over the last 24 hours for some wildcard and now they're looking for another one. That might actually not work. I do have a bunch of Mimikatz here. Star. You say Mimikatz.exe. Look at that. I learned something. Thanks, BT. This is awesome. Okay, so which index was this? And this was win event log. All right. It would be a shame that you have a nice thing like Splunk and you're like me, you don't have alerting when somebody runs Mimikatz. This should be like a default rule. So right now, as you can see, we ran our Mimikatz from the C Windows temp directory, which is exactly where we were. So this will tell us, hey, someone was on a system running Mimikatz. What should you do about this? You should alert when obvious tools like Mimikatz, Rubius, PowerShell is being run, and any of those things. So by just running Mimikatz as an attacker, you know you are risking getting detected because it's such a silly thing. So let's see how many times we actually did this. I'm going to collapse this 3 times. Oh, but this is an interesting one. It actually gives us the command that was ran. Does anyone remember us making this command here using setutil? So now you can go and tell a story to your friends like, hey, someone actually ran setutil to get Mimikatz on my system. They put it in the Windows temp directory. Then they ran the damn thing. And then, of course, if you look at your messages here, they ran the SPN search to find a bunch of password hashes. Then your goal from there is to just go back to your system. Let's sign in again. Get these SPN passwords. I hate that I can't clear my screen from here. Now all you have to do is dump all these SPN passwords. And then, of course, hopefully, if you can, crack them using John. And this brings us to a very interesting question. You dumped a bunch of password hashes. Yeah, you dumped a bunch of password hashes from the victim. They are sitting on the victim. What do you do to get them out of here? When you did the cat command, you saw a bunch of gibberish. That is not going to be really something that you can copy. You actually need to make sure that you can crack this on your system. So let me see how I can do this. I think I got someone who's trying to spam my stream. So let me make BT a moderator here, if I can. So I can have this person banned. Someone is creating random accounts and coming back. Must be some bots. Anyway, if they come back, next time I'll have a moderator, a couple moderators to make sure that this doesn't happen again. All right, so we're back to attacking Active Directory. You dumped a bunch of password hashes. they're sitting here in this format. Going back to our instructions, we need to copy these to be in a hash format, so we can just move them. So this person here just renamed this to that, then convert them to whatever those things are. Well, how do we move them from Windows to Kali Linux? Because it's a two-way street. You need to be able to put things on the victim. You need to be able to move things away from the victim. And if you can't do those things, the OSCP is going to kick your ass, because it's a very, very critical system that you skill that you need to know. How do I move things on to the system and also away from the system? And I'll share with you a resource that I found here. I use this a lot, even during the exam for my OSCP. It's just nice. So this is post-exploitation file transfers on Windows, the manual way. So it tells you like, hey, by the way, this is how you do it. And this is Python, HTTP, and PowerShell. And this is how you download things. HTTP and setutil. So this is the one that I actually used. My screen is zoomed in. Let me see. All right, there we go. Thanks for that. Then HTTP and VB script. Try all these ways here, because they will really help you. And here is how you can actually just move a bunch of files, if you can, to the system and away from the victim. So the first part is going to show you like, hey, by the way, this is how you do things. Is it just one way? Yes, I actually have a better link here. Let me share with you a better link that shows you the both ways. Yeah, this is a better link here. I'm going to put it in the comments as well. Transferring files from Linux to Windows in your post-exploitation. It's actually nicer that way. And of course, it shows you need to know a few ways, because if one doesn't work, doesn't mean that you can move files. If another one doesn't work, you can always try to see. In this case, we have an SMB file here, setting up the server and the summary, which is kind of nice. All right, so let's see if we can move this file here from our victim to our Kali Linux machine, because we need this away from there. And for that, let me find out. I have a link here. To move files from Windows to Kali. All right, let's see. Give me 1 second. I don't know if this thing's memorized. All right. You know what? It's actually easier that way. Let's do it this way. Since we're already on the victim and we have all these password hashes here, another thing that we can do, instead of getting these, let's see if we can rerun our Mimikatz and dump the actual password hashes for the administrator. Then I can just copy that password hash and hopefully do a password hash. All right, let me see. Let's just dump the administrator's password hash. Yes, you should have some notes because there's so many things. I mean, it's crazy. Okay, so I just looked up this blog post here. How do I dump administrator password hashes from using Mimikatz? And of course, someone writes it in detail like, hey, by the way, you can use DC sync. In this case, it's actually vulnerable to that. If you're on the domain controller in this case, you can do a debug, then an inject. That should actually give us the actual hashes without moving anything. All right. You can also do an impersonate here and see. But right now, oh, this is interesting. It actually dumped all the hashes for me. So if you don't want all these, the most important hashes that you want here are the NTLM hashes. I have all hashes from the system. So if you're on an Active Directory machine and you have Mimikatz, I mean, it's game over. Let's be real here. This is my Exchange account. It's not being used by anything because I'm not running Exchange. And here's its NTLM hash. You want to know about this one. But the most interesting one is the administrator one. But let's just go through the list here and see which hashes we actually got here. Because we did get a few. Here's another service account. The NTLM hash, this is a MySQL service, the database one. I wasn't using this one. We should see another HTTP service that also has a hash here. It's probably going to come back very soon. But if you get to a point where you can dump password hashes from an Active Directory environment, I mean, by that time, you have owned the domain. That's pretty much what this is all about. The Windows Event Forwarder, NTLM hash. So we have a bunch of them here. And this is the first time I'm seeing these. That's why I'm actually looking through all of them to see which hashes I actually have. Oh yeah, this is the HTTP service account that I was talking about. This is the one that if you get the machine and you download it from the comments, this is the one that you'll be dropped in as on this system. You'll be in as HTTP service. And that account, actually, you can do Kerberoasting like I did here. All right. Of course, I configured a bunch of other users as well. So let's pick on this one. Susanna Lucia. Here's this person's NTLM hash. There's something called pass the hash. So if this hash is valid right now, we can try to use, say, something like if WinRM and sign on this user's computer, not the Active Directory, but any computer that's on the system, on the network, we can actually try to pass this hash. We don't even need to crack it, which is kind of interesting. We also have, of course, the administrator is somewhere in there, which is the most important one. But I have 100 users that I created here, and they are all the users' hashes, their name, their NTLM hash. And if you're curious, like, oh, what is an NTLM hash? An NTLM hash is a hash that you get from a Windows Active Directory, and this hash here is as good as a password. Think about it this way. You initiate a session, you get authenticated to an Active Directory environment, you get this hash here, you can pass this hash to an SMB server. It sees this hash, compares to Active Directory, it says, yeah, you're authenticated. So you can either crack these hashes to get the real passwords, or you can just use them as passwords. For most services and resources on the network, these are as good as that. I forgot that I had like over 100 users, so I actually do have every single user here in their hash, which is way better than what I was doing here, where we're dumping the SPN hash. And these are two different types of hashes. The SPN hash, SPN has to be configured on the system. The user has to have the configuration like do not check the Kerberos, or it's a service account with SPN enabled. Those are the two things that have to happen for SPN. The hashes, on the other hand, you can get them as long as you can get Mimikatz and you can execute commands. That's the main difference here. And once you get an NTLM hash, you're able to pretty much do what you can. So I won't keep scrolling here, but we have a bunch of hashes. And of course, as an attacker, you want to save all these to a file, if you can. Then try to figure out which of these people work in IT, which of these people are administrators, which of these people are useless users who might not get you anywhere. All right, that was a lot of talking. I'd like to go back to, you know what, let me actually do one more thing. Let's do a, see if I can get PowerShell to work here with my reverse shell. The only reason why I'm invoking PowerShell here, to be honest with you, is because I want to mess with my Splunk. Remember, I said my Splunk does have PowerShell logging enabled. I just want to test it. I haven't tested it, and I want to mess with it to make sure that, you know, if it's going to really work, I want to see it in action. So, like I said earlier, we actually have an index called PowerShell. So right now, this is my chance to mess with PowerShell and see if I can execute some random PowerShell command and see if that command is going to give me any logging. It will either show up on the main page here, or I can just search for it. But PowerShell logging is right here. So the last time a PowerShell command ran, this is what happened. Why don't we mess with PowerShell by doing it this way? Let's download Mimikatz, this time using PowerShell. This way, you know another way of downloading files. So in my file transfer section here, I do have PowerShell. So let's use one of these, PowerShell EXE. This is downloading Netcat, but let's use it for Mimikatz. Always set up your commands somewhere. So this is going to be 192.168.38.31. I'm going to say, you know what? Let's leave it to Netcat. Why not? Let's bring up Netcat. All right, so the one that I want, don't use any random Netcat that you find. Use the one from here. This is a very reliable one. Do a copy. You will notice my workflow always involves, if I have a binary that I need to move to the victim, I don't copy it from the original. I don't move the original. I always copy from that original to my directory. Then from there, I'll move the binary. Two things. It's mostly because sometimes I need to modify these things and I don't want to modify the originals. All right. Let's start up our Python simple HTTP server. Let's move the binary. Remember, we just want to try to mess with PowerShell here. And this is supposed to download netcat from our victim to the temp folder. And if it downloads netcat, which is a binary, I sure hope that our logging is going to catch that. I keep wanting to clear here, but I can't, of course. All right, that didn't like it. Well, because I'm already in PowerShell, so I don't think it likes my quotes. I think it doesn't like these. Let's put new ones. Even though it failed, we should still have a log for them. Anyway. All right. Now let's try it again. See? When you have been through a few things, you know, you can run into these errors and you have not practiced and you just sign up for OSCP after a month, your brain will start playing games with you like, oh my God, this thing doesn't work. I must be doing something wrong. But if you have seen quotes messing with you and you have worked with this, you see what I just did here? I was like, oh, I think it's the quotes. I didn't even read the errors. I know these fat quotes here don't work. All right, so we just ran a PowerShell thing magic here. Let's give it a second to see if it actually works. I hope this works. Otherwise, my detection needs to be some fine tuning. First, let me refresh this. This is PowerShell logging. You notice that I'm not going in detail as to like what's happening here, but what happens is if a Windows environment, you want to do PowerShell logging. What that means is if someone runs PowerShell in your environment, you want to know what command they ran, when, and what that command was, especially if those commands involve binaries. In this case, my PowerShell logging is working. Look at what just happened here in my Splunk security events and log management system here. Even the failed commands were logged. It told me like, oh, if you're looking at this, you're probably thinking, wow, this attacker must really not know what they're doing. I mean, the syntax is all over the place. But PowerShell logging doesn't care. It still found the command and it still told us. Here's another way when we did the same thing. Let's go to the other one. Here's when we just typed the word PowerShell. Here's the PowerShell new object when you're downloading netcat. What does this tell you? This just tells you that if you have best practice, some of you, I know some people who watch these live streams are like security administrators, seasoned people. Deploying things like PowerShell logging, creating real alerts that actually are very specific, like, hey, if PowerShell ever runs netcat or setutil or any of those things, let me know. It's going to really help. Deploying Sysmon and Win event log is going to be very valuable, but it will surprise me if anyone worth their salt who manages Windows environments does not have PowerShell logging on their Windows Active Directory machine. If you are running a domain controller, putting myself back 10 years from now, when I was running Active Directory, I would make sure that I have PowerShell logging working. Why? Because right here we can see this can be very, very valuable. Oh, why was somebody putting netcat on my system when I should have known about this? And it doesn't have to be in Splunk. So as far as detection is concerned, if you're going to be using PowerShell as an attacker, know that people always have PowerShell logging because people are getting smarter. If you're going to be using setutil, they will catch you as well. So you might be curious, like, oh, how then do I move files here? The best way that I think you can, even if you still get caught, but to maximize your chances, base64 encode these things if you don't want these commands to show up as directly as they can. Maybe use some form of obscure, there's a word that I'm trying to say, I can't say it. make sure make sure that you encode things. Base64 being the easiest one because everybody does it. Send them the payloads as a different format than just plain text the way I did it today. Because this, obviously, as you can see, gets caught every single time without a doubt. The fact that it even shows the whole transaction that we saw is kind of like, very interesting. All right. So as you can see, I'm getting really carried away by this Splunk stuff. This is so much fun. I'm so used to Security Onion, and I have not played with Splunk a lot. I don't work with Splunk every day at work. I'm not an administrator or security analyst, so don't hold me accountable if I butchered any Splunk stuff. My Security Onion didn't catch anything, and I'll tell you why. It's not receiving mirrored traffic. I postponed my live stream today to see if I can forward it using my pod mirror, but obviously it's not working, so I'll fix it for next time. But I hope you enjoyed our Splunk lab. Please make sure to set it up using BT's video that he posted in the comments. It's very thorough. You will actually end up here. You can set it up in VMware. I encourage you to set it up just in ESXi if you can. Otherwise, set it up in VirtualBox, whatever systems you can. It will also run in AWS, and I've set it up in GCP. If you want custom machines that you can add to that lab, every week I'll be modifying either our domain controller or our client. I'll put some interesting service there. I'll put something that will let us in. Then after we get in, we can do more of these. So if you enjoy these things, please like, subscribe, tell your friends to come and hang out with me. You're almost guaranteed you learn a thing or two every Sunday, so don't miss these ones. Otherwise, if you have any questions, let me know. This is super fun for me. There's so much to learn. I don't claim to be an expert here, but if you like to learn from someone who's just like you, who doesn't know what they're doing, this is a place to hang out. If you want to go and be with the experts, that's also a great thing. All right. Oh no, yeah, you can always rewatch this. You don't have to wait. A few things that I'll mention before I go though. Detection lab can be a pain when you're setting it up. If you run into any issues, just make sure to be just patient. Let me know if you need any help. I'll be happy to help you set it up. It's a very interesting lab, but you can set it up in Azure, ESXi, Hyper-V, any way you want. And there are videos how to do it. All right, so someone is asking about how to understand basic Active Directory attacks. Let me show you where you can go. If you want a checklist, there's a Payload, all things Active Directory list that you need to just go and visit. This is by far the best resource that you can use. The reason why I'm pointing you to this resource is, guess what? The offensive security people, for those who are going for the OSCP, they're not stupid. They're not going to give you Active Directory attacks that are out of this world, that nobody knows, that are obscure, because they will have all of us criticizing them for the exam being unnecessarily hard. They're going to ask you silly things like Kerberoasting, the SPN attacks, how to use Bloodhound, how to pivot between these things, because those are the common ones. But the way that they're going to ask you those questions is not going to be like, hey, just go around and look for these attacks. They're going to put a twist there to force your critical thinking. Like they will have you attack a service. Then once you get in, you can do all your stuff. They're going to put the password hashes in a different format so you can crack them. They're not just going to make you just, do those things directly. But at the same time, Active Directory attacks, I'm almost confident if you go there, any attack that is in the exam for any OSCP or even misconfiguration on most of your client's environment is going to be on this list here. That's just the nature of how things work. Anyone who has an exam They can't just go and create some obscure, hard to crack for the sake of it. It's useless. It has to be real world. It has to be something that people know, but of course they'll put a twist to it. What's going to get you the most is not Active Directory attacks. It's going to be the initial access. How do you break in? How do you find a list of users? Can you check for those SPN accounts? So use this as your best. And if I were going to any exam or before I interviewed for a pen test job that has a lot of Active Directory involved, I would make sure I'm familiar with all, if not any Active Directory attack that is out there, that's known and that's documented. I'll try it. I have to try it at least once. You don't want to show up to an exam and try the Kerberoasting or password spraying for the first time. That is silly, that is stupid, you shouldn't do it. If you're going for the OSCP and it's Active Directory, which is, I think they actually said it's 40 points. I wrote on Reddit today, earlier, this has to be the easiest 40 points that you can ever get, because what else are they going to ask you? There's at least like 12 things that you have to know about Active Directory, like SMB signing and, Kerberoasting attacks, default credentials, SMB. There is very little that you have to know, and just go, make sure to go through this list here. And of course, using the lab that I told you to set up, you'll be able to get it all done. I hope this helps accelerate, but if it's downing, have this page here, make it a point. I need to know how to use Bloodhound, which I'll use in one of my live streams in the coming weeks. Bloodhound is going to be very helpful when you're coming from a client and we're trying to see the accounts that we found on a client and how it ties to the Active Directory. Then we can just run Bloodhound and see how it works. Make it a point. I need to know how to use maybe PowerView, AD modules, zero logon, all these things here. I would know all of these. And today, what we did is we used Mimikatz. We didn't crack the hashes, but we used this part here. This is what we did today. All right. Thanks, X86. This is really cool stuff. For me, what's my next cert? For me, this year, this is the blue team year. I'm not in the offensive security certifications as such. I'm looking at blue team certifications. I haven't spoken about this to my employer, but there's a couple of certifications, maybe science certifications on the blue side. I want to get really good at finding out about malicious activity. I also have a curiosity about not only just detection in general, but host-based detection, especially on looking at how you can actually properly detect host information using Sysmon, PowerShell. My main interest is PowerShell because I've seen a lot of attackers use PowerShell scripts to get on systems. Then, of course, Windows events or Linux events in general. So I don't know. I don't have a certifications listed yet, but I want to get really good at understanding how incident response works, and also how defenders really look at these things and dig in, not just at the surface of saying, oh, here's a command that was ran, but understand, okay, when we are looking at Sysmon events, what does that look like for attackers, especially those who try to hide? So that's my main goal. So on this channel, even though I'll continue to attack, it's going to be a lot of detection because I'm just fascinated by that. PNPT in 3 weeks. Oh, that's going to be fun. I'm thinking about PNPT. I've heard a lot of really good things about it. I also watched all the videos from the Cyber Mentor, and I'm tempted to try it. We'll see. I think it's only like $300, so it's not an expensive exam or something. And you get, last time I checked, was it unlimited retries or 2, 3? I have to check that one. But for the practical network penetration tester. I think that's what it's called. That's going to be fun. Let me know how that goes, because I might try it after June. All right, if you missed the whole attack, we just did just a little bit of attacking on an Active Directory machine. The main goal today was for me to show you that you need to break in somehow using a vulnerable service, vulnerable application. Then once you get in, you can put your Mimikatz. Mimikatz was today's point. After that, next time we can say, okay, once you break in, maybe you can use Bloodhound, because you can crack the password hashes and move on. And then, of course, there are other tools. So if you want to follow along starting next weekend, this is going to be our lab. Of course, in addition to Security Onion, where we see the network and the host base, but this lab is here to stay. BT made a video. Make sure to follow that video and set up your own lab. And if you have any questions, for those who are members for this channel, on Friday or Wednesday, just let me know. Email me if you're a channel member. You and I, we can set this lab up, or I can start a Zoom call and we can all set it up together. It has to be at 9 p.m. in any weekday, no earlier than that. Otherwise, that's it. I'll see you guys next week, and happy hacking.